Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Displayland podcast. I'm your host, Ollie,
And I'm your other host, Joey.
and today we're going to be taking you through tornadoes and weather events. We're also going to be taking you through recent Takeoff Thursday announcements, along with Hampshire announcements as well as Midland announcements. So, without further ado, Joey, do you want to get us started on our news segment?
Yeah, it's quite the long news segment this week, especially, more so the war news because it's been quite the busy 2 weeks because we wasn't here last week. I was on holiday. So Ollie had the promos covered. So we got a decent bit of Iran news. Iran, I was told I was pronouncing it wrong. So Iran news, and Ukrainian war news a little bit as well. So we'll start off with a video of an F-16 crash site that wasn't an F-16 crash site, but everyone on the internet thinks it is an F-16, but it's actually likely a failed missile. Now, the reason we're bringing this up is because people think it's an F-16 crash. It's been all over the aviation news and all sorts. So we originally did have it saved for this podcast episode as a possible F-16 crash, but having seen the videos and people analysing them, it is very likely a failed missile as opposed to an F-16. There was also an Iranian suicide drone that struck a US Chinook on an airfield in Kuwait the other day, and as well as possibly two C-130s and possibly also an MH6. So it's been a little bit busy for that part of the world recently in the news.
Yeah, now we do have a list. Excuse me. We do have a list of all the damaged or destroyed aircraft, which I'm going to take you through now. So far, this is from 2 weeks ago. So this was not an updated list, but this is something that I saw 2 weeks ago. So we have two C-130s, one A-10, one F-35 that's only severely damaged, two destroyed KC-135s, and four 135s that are severely damaged, four F-15s, 17 Reaper drones, an E-3, two Chinooks, four Little Birds, and three Black Hawks. So quite a big loss for the United States there, with some of their prized possessions, such as the F-35, such as the F-15s, and the A-10 that literally only got put over there like a few days before that it got damaged and shot down.
Yeah, the two C-130s is a rather interesting situation because they actually got stuck in sand apparently. This all the stuff here is more so alleged than anything and based on videos and stuff. But two C-130s went in to go and recover downed pilots from F-15s, and they got stuck in the sand, and they had to destroy them so that they couldn't be reverse engineered or just taken by the Iranians. So it's quite a unique way of losing two C-130s, but it happens.
Yeah, now talking of reverse engineering, there are videos going around actually surfacing of a radar that the apparently the Iranians have found. Now, whether this is AI or not, we can't tell. It's literally just a basic video that me and Joe have seen on multiple news platforms through TikTok and Twitter. So if the Iranians do have their hands on this on this radar, then it could be really bad for the Americans. Now, depending on what radar it is and what aircraft it's come from, it could sort of really determine how much information Iran has got from this one radar.
Yeah, and you mentioned the AI thing. That is one important thing with this war. It is really, really hard to verify anything because both sides are making AI videos, both sides are making fake videos or real videos. It's really difficult to determine what's real and what's not nowadays.
Yeah, there's a lot of propaganda as well of AI going around, and it's just something that people have to be so careful of, which is why we're sort of, which is sort of why we're not confirming that this is true, but we're just letting people know in case it is true. Now, just quickly before we do continue, I do have a bit of a sore throat this week, unfortunately, so I'll try my best to be more clear in my words, but I just wanted to let everyone know if you were wondering why I'm a bit bit yeah, a bit my voice is a bit different this week.
Yeah, so moving north now to the Russia-Ukraine war, we don't have a whole lot on this, but we have a little bit. Ukrainians have been attaching fishing rods onto drones to sort of tangle Russian drones with the fishing lines and tangle with the propellers, as well as sometimes just ramming the fishing rod into the drone.
Yeah, so we discussed not last week, in the last podcast, with shotgun drones and these sort of like hot metal rod drones. We now have fishing rod drones. So I mean, it just seems that they're putting anything on drones at this point. You know, there's just hundreds of variations of all these drones. You have you had warheads and fishing rods and shotguns and literally just everything put on these drones now. I mean, there's something that I mean you you could probably get anything and shove it on a drone and it will do something in a war. And I'm sure we'll see many more inventions as the week go by.
Yeah, it has been quite a progressive few years for Ukraine and Russia with the advancements and sort of adapting and putting new things on drones, old things on drones, and just trying to get one step ahead of the other side. And then the other side gets one step ahead of them with a new, different addition to a drone. And it's just a repeating cycle of adding new things to drones that you didn't expect to go on a drone. And now we've got shotgun drones and fishing rod drones. So it's been an interesting few years.
Yeah, exactly, and like I said, I'm sure we'll see more more of these inventions to come. But as we move on, talking about KC-135s, as there has been six either damaged or destroyed. One of them that was damaged, not confirmed if this is included in that, but it had shrapnel damage. It flew from the Middle East to RAF Mildenhall or US Air Force Mildenhall, depending on how you see it, before departing then back over to America. Completely normal flight levels, so clearly the shrapnel damage wasn't too bad, and it was just indenting into the aircraft rather than any holes or anything that could cause pressure leaks or any oxygen leaks. So it flew from 30,000 feet to 32,000 feet on the way back. So it doesn't look like the damage is too bad, but it's definitely going to be an expensive one to either replace or fix.
Yeah, the pictures of that is quite a unique picture to get, and some people I saw were saying that oh, it's just metal patches on the um, airframe, but the only reason they would have those patches is to cover up any shrapnel damage, and it is very visibly in a shrapnel pattern.
Yeah, exactly. But we move on to our last sort of part of this Iranian war, coming on to the end section. The US Air Force has used its rarest plane. The plane itself isn't a very rare plane. Many nations across the world use this aircraft. However, the America only operates one of them, being the C-295W that was used in F-15 rescues, along with the C-130s, Chinooks, and Blackhawks.
Yeah, you really don't see this thing flying much because they only have one. They try and sort of keep it in low risk areas, but they really risked it. The flying low level over Iran, looking for this pilot.
Yeah, 100%. And luckily, there's no reports of it being damaged or shot down in any way. So it looks like for now, it's still flying and it's still being used by the US Air Force. Now, in other sort of war news, but not really actual war news, a man broke into a US Air Force base and damaged a C-130 with some sort of tool. Now, it's undisclosed as per usual. We don't really know the full details of this, but we thought we'd let everyone know about this very strange incident that's happened. So, yeah, we don't really know too much. We just know that a man jumped on top of a C-130, damaged it with some sort of tool, and then was escorted off the base and I assume arrested.
Something very similar actually happened in the UK. I believe it was last year or the year before that, with Palestine Action, destroying a C-130. Well, say destroying, uh, temporarily putting it out of service. So it is concerning that people are being able to get this close to aircraft, and even for the case of the guy the other day jumping on top of a C-130.
Yeah, it sure shows the lack of security around these bases these days. It just seems like you can just easily get into a base and start damaging an aircraft. Yeah, it's just really a lack of security and a lack of surveillance as well of the area.
Yeah, I think hopefully they'll tighten the security around every single military base after this incident, because that is not something we want. Whether you agree with the war or not, destroying property is bad, especially government property. It's not what you want to do. You'll cost taxpayers money as well. It's not just government money, it will be the people around you that it's costing money from. So it's just not great to do.
Yeah, exactly. But we're going to move on to the exciting sort of news part of this podcast because there's been a lot of space news, especially Artemis 2. So Joe's going to talk you through some of the static fires that have been happening, and then we're both going to talk you through a little bit about the end of the Artemis mission.
Yeah, so we'll save the Artemis more for the end because we've got a few, as Ollie said, static fires to go through. So, SpaceX's Starship has started its test campaign now, with Booster 19 doing an igniter test which is basically doing everything except flowing fuel through the engine. So you do the thing that ignites the fuel without the fuel actually present. That was the other day. I can't remember exactly which date, but I know a day later, Ship 39, which will go on top of the booster. I'm sure we'll find pictures to put on the screen for it. That also did that did a static fire of all six engines, and the duration of that static fire was 1 whole minute, which is quite the long static fire, especially considering they haven't really done a multi-engine test of these new V3 engines before. So it's quite a bold move going straight for a 1 minute static fire, but as far as everyone has seen, it's worked out perfectly fine. But the main event came yesterday, as of the time of recording this. Booster 19 did a static fire. Now this is um, the major news of the week, apart from Artemis 2, obviously, because this thing has 33 of the most powerful rocket engines in the world. So just one of these is the most powerful in the world. It has 33 of them. It was only on the static fire that it did, it was only at 50% thrust. And that was still more powerful than the Saturn V that took people to the moon back in the 60s and 70s. So it was just quite a powerful static fire. It very loud. All the remote cameras that people had set up were shaking during it. It basically made a cloud out of the steam. It was certainly something to see. I watched it live. I watched the Igniter test live and the Ship 39 static fire live, and it's a very fun test campaign to be following. And it's not just SpaceX with Starship that's done a static fire as well. Blue Origin has also done a static fire of its New Glenn. It's New Glenn 3 rocket, which is the third New Glenn rocket. And this is exciting because it is reusing the booster for the first time. Not the engines, they've refurbished the engines, put new engines in, but they are reusing its booster for the first time, which is going to be quite interesting to watch the live stream for that launch because it lands similar to a Falcon 9, but it's much bigger than a Falcon 9. So that's it for the static fires. We'll quickly talk about the NASA 777, the NASA Boeing 777 that people have seen uh, being sort of fitted with all the test stuff, and they're getting ready to utilize it as like a sort of a mobile science lab sort of thing.
Now, the 777 is replacing the older DC-8, which is sort of just in the DC line. So there's things like the DC-3, which is the Douglas Dakota, that was sort of made in World War II. So it's come a long, long way since then. Most notoriously, the DC-3, DC-6, and DC-8 are the main aircraft. Along the line of the DC. So yeah, but NASA owned many aircraft, we said before, and it has owned many aircraft throughout the years, which include things like the F-18, the WB-57, the triple seven, and we will be talking about the WB-57 a little bit more. I know we talked about one of them crashing before, but we will be talking about it a little bit more for the Artemis mission. But yeah, for now, the 777 is a very awesome aircraft. It's a very large aircraft though, so it's not really an aircraft that I thought NASA would acquire one day, but it's something that they have, and it's something that I'm sure will be bringing some good research to NASA.
Yeah, it's definitely got a lot of space for a lot of different research aspects. It's got plenty of space for stuff that they maybe have not been able to test before. So it's going to be exciting to see what they utilize it for. But as for the WB-57, they utilized that just last week, and it was certainly something to watch. The Artemis returning home after their 10-day mission. So I'll talk a bit more about that mission, uh, as it was quite interesting, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinions, as the re-entry alone had 3 million viewers on YouTube, and that was just YouTube. It had millions on different platforms. I know people who don't really care about space who were watching it, and it's definitely bringing a lot more attention to sort of the space exploration and sort of astronaut area.
Yeah, I personally enjoyed Artemis, and I'm not like the biggest fan like Joey is, but I'm still there. I love space, and it's something that I'm interested in. And me and Joey both watched the launch live. We both watched the re-entry live, and we have many pictures that we can put up on the screen. I'm sure they're probably up on the screen right now. And we'll label the ones with the WB-57. I mean, it's pretty much just the black and white ones with the sort of thermal imaging camera that was the WB-57. But it was so amazing. They used it for a good, like 20 minutes of recording recording the rocket go into space and it coming back down from space. The capsule. The WB-57, there is two of them, so NASA do have two of them. One of them was damaged in a crash that we mentioned about a month or so ago, but then they used the other one there, so the second one that they have for this launch, and they used it very, very well, I think, and I think everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah, they got some incredible footage. I was going through the NASA archive, looking at all the footage that they got. They got some incredible footage. The live launch footage wasn't great, but they haven't done a launch that big since 2022, and it's a lot of cameras. They had over 900 cameras just lined up for that launch to get the most amount of data possible. So it's quite the task to be the person clicking which button to go to which camera live when you only have a second to react. So I can't blame the person operating that, but it wasn't the best launch footage. I know a lot of people were complaining about it. Some people were making TikToks mocking it, which were quite funny. I sent Ollie a few of those. Um, so it was certainly something to watch, and we'll get into some of the details about Artemis 2. They spent just over 9 days in space from launch to landing. The launch went perfectly. They had a few minor issues just after launch. They had a slight comms blackout for about 10 seconds just after launch, and they still don't know why. They're still working on that. But it was no problem. They got comms back in about 10 seconds or so. They had an Outlook problem, Microsoft Outlook. They had an issue with that. I don't know sort of how it works in space. I've never been. But they had two Microsoft Outlooks, and apparently neither of them worked. But they seem to have sorted that one out on the launch, after the launch in space. They also had a few toilet issues. Um, they had, like, throughout the entire mission, 3 or 4 separate times where the toilets were broken, and they had to use these, like, disposable bags sort of things. It's not ideal conditions on a 10-day mission, but they did get to fixing the toilets, and it worked out in the end. And they did everything they aimed for. They flew around the moon. They went further than any humans have ever gone before at just over 410,000 kilometers, or 250,000 miles. We'll probably put the exact number up on screen. They re-entered Earth's atmosphere at over 24,000 miles an hour. Not quite the world's fastest humans ever. They're about 100 miles an hour short of that, from the Apollo 17 missions. So they still broke one world record, and they had a world's first as well, being the first people to see a solar eclipse from up by the moon. And the reason that it's the first, even though people have orbited the moon and seen the sunset behind the moon, is because the Artemis 2 crew could see the entire moon. They could see the entire circle of the moon and it being in a solar eclipse. So that's, I suppose, what NASA classes as a solar eclipse, being able to see the entire circumference of the moon. And they got some incredible pictures. And even as of now, we're still getting those pictures coming through. And we could spend half an hour putting those pictures up on screen, but we'll probably just put the most important ones. Ones of Earthrise and Earthset, which is when, as the name implies, just like sunset and sunrise, the Earth sets behind the moon and the Earth rises behind the moon. Just one of the most iconic pictures of all time, especially of the Apollo missions, was the Earthrise picture, which was, as I said, the Earth rising behind the moon. It was just one of the most iconic pictures, and they got to recreate it perfectly with the Earth set and Earthrise on this mission. So they got some incredible pictures, and it's one of my favorite sort of events that I've witnessed in my life, and I can't wait for Artemis 3 and 4.
Yeah, same to be honest. I'm really excited for the Artemis 3 and 4 mission, which they're planning to do next year, I believe, for the Artemis 3, and then Artemis 4 by 2028, sort of at the earliest, and then 2030 at the latest, depending on how Artemis 3 goes, depending on how the data from Artemis 2 is, and all the stuff around that. If it's not safe to do Artemis 4 in 2028, then obviously they will have to delay it. But we're on course. Really fast. Miss 4 to happen in 2028, so it's going to be very, very exciting, and me and Joey are very excited, and so are millions of people around the world. Like you said, 3 million people alone on YouTube watched the re-entry of Artemis 2, and that's not even the most important mission yet, so I think it's something
Yeah,
to
this was
really look out
like
for.
Yeah, this was a sort of Apollo 8 and Apollo 9 sort of merged together, and um, even then, Apollo 8 and 9 saw not even a fraction of the viewers that Artemis 2 got. And as for the popularity of this event, I mean, they were playing it on like cricket games, at sports games in America. They had the splashdown on the screens. People were watching it with their families. People were watching it on big screens. Just all over the world, everyone was tuning into that, and it's just so incredible to see all of humanity just sat down to watch this one event, and they're all just watching humanity take that one leap that they've been waiting for 53 years to do, just to get back into getting on the moon.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting, and me and Joey, like I said, are really both excited for it. But we do have to move on to so one of our final news sections, which is just a generic aviation news section. And we start off with an Iceland Air pilot on his retirement flight, flying about 100 feet over his hometown. Now, the FAA are investigating this. As it was, it's not something that you can't really fly 100 feet over a civilianly populated area. You shouldn't be flying at 100 feet anyway, no matter where it is, as it does put us a big danger towards everyone on board. And even if it was just the captain, he could lose a plane from that if something goes wrong. So yeah, he is under investigation, but I mean they can't really do much considering the fact that he isn't even flying anymore. I mean they can take his license away, but that was his last ever flight. So yeah, he'll probably end up with a massive fine or something like that. He might even get arrested for some sort of public endangerment sort of charges. But yeah, we'll update you in the coming weeks of sort of how this case ends up.
Yeah, the videos of it were quite amazing to see. It's not a good thing to do, but you do get some great videos of it when it does happen. I mean, just seeing a plane like that flying so low over areas like that, it does not happen often. So just seeing that is very unique perspective.
Now, our next bit of the news, unfortunately, is a private jet crash in Bolivia. It seems as if the cabin lost pressure, the pilots went unconscious, and then it just started spinning and spinning and spinning until it eventually crashed into the ground. Now, this is something that is very unfortunate. However, from what me and Joey can find, this is the only actual crash outside of the Iran or Ukrainian conflict within the last few weeks. So one is definitely a very low number, and it's something that if we're going to see any crashes, we only want to see one every couple of weeks or so, and hopefully there will be minimal casualties. But it looks, unfortunately, from this, it looks like everyone on board did unfortunately pass away.
Yeah, now you mentioned the cabin pressure thing. That is sort of speculative. There has been no official word on what caused it, as to whether this was done, like this was a major accident, or whether there was something else at play, whether it was a bird strike possibly. I doubt it was a bird strike, but just anything else that could have caused it. But based on what a lot of people think, just looking at the flight path and how it sort of happened, uh, sort of passing out seems like the most likely cause, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, so it's basically just a preliminary report. So basically, just a very first impression of what's happening. It's just something that they very quickly sort of briefed over it and then sort of come to a conclusion. But it's not something that is anywhere near confirmed at all. It's just something that me and Joey, like I said, have seen on multiple platforms. But we are going to move on though to the B-21 Raider, so the brand new stealth bomber for the United States, was caught refueling, or not really caught, but there's photos of it refueling for the first time ever that we have seen. And the pictures are just awesome. It's such a cool looking aircraft. It looks like such a beastie aircraft, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Hopefully in the future, when me and Joey go on our American tour to go tornado chasing, we might stop off at a few air bases, because they should, in theory, be flying by then. Because this tour won't be happening for another 5-10 years. So it's something that I'm really excited to see, and obviously it's the successor of the B2, B2.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it, hopefully one day, and maybe they might even get to go into air shows. I doubt they will, but seeing that thing flying at an air show would be, like, incredible.
Yeah, it's honestly something that is definitely on the bucket list to see, and I'm sure that we probably will see it in the future. So yeah, me and Joe are both really excited for that. But Joey, do you want to take us through the Qantas project that's going on?
Yeah, so Qantas is actually sort of preparing for 22-hour-long flights with an A350. Now, you see flights going in and out of countries for maybe at most 12 hours. Sometimes maybe a bit longer than that if it's uh, cross continent, but a 22-hour-long flight is pretty much unheard of. I mean, I personally have the longest I've ever flown was 3 or 4 hours. So seeing a 22-hour-long flight, I cannot imagine being sat in those seats for 22 hours.
Yeah, now basically, instead of stopping off and getting on a new plane to go to your destination, it's basically just flying from like Sydney, Australia to London Heathrow, rather than stopping off in somewhere like Turkey or Dubai or somewhere like this, like a stop off point before then continuing your flight. So, in some sort of aspects, it's probably quicker than a stop off flight because then you might have to wait a few hours for your flight, for your second or third flight, depending on how many stops there are. So it definitely will probably be boring, but I'm sure it'll be some sort of luxury plane, and you probably have to pay quite a lot of money. And there won't be many sort of lower classes in there, so I'm sure most of them will have beds or little small cabins where you can sleep. Because yeah, like Joey said, I could not imagine just being awake for 22 hours on a flight.
Yeah, so moving now on to an EasyJet flight that had to abort the landing and land somewhere else because of fireworks that were apparently from a wedding that was going on, and they set off fireworks right as the plane was coming into land, so it had to turn around and go and land somewhere else just for safety reasons.
Yeah, now I'm not sure that it was probably the best setting off fireworks about a mile from the airport, but I mean these things happen. I mean it's a big day. I'm sure they're probably not thinking about the airport around them. They're thinking about their loved one. But yeah, it's probably not the best setting off fireworks as a plane is coming on to approach. But yeah, these things happen, and the EasyJet did land safely once it did its go around. So yeah, no real harm done other than a bit of jet fuel wasted. Now, we're going to move swiftly on to our weather segment as this will lead on to the main part of the podcast. So, there has been a very large, at least 5 day severe weather event over the last few days, and it is still currently ongoing of the time of recording, which is the 16th of April. And there has been confirmed one EF3 with multiple EF2s alongside it. Now, Joey does have a few more details, so he's going to take you through that.
Yeah, so far there has been at least a dozen tornadoes, most of them being around Iowa, sort of that north middle. I believe they call it Midwest, even though it's
Yeah.
not West at all. But just from in history, they call it the Midwest. Sort of that area of the U.S. has seen significant uh, tornadoes, seen a lot of tornadoes as well. There's been some incredible pictures from it's called Wyoming, but it's in Iowa. There's a city called Wyoming in the state of Iowa that did get hit by a tornado, and I believe that was the EF3. Although it is important to note that the EF3 and EF2 ratings right now are preliminary. They have to do a bit more investigation and analysis of all the pictures of the damage to really confirm the damage rating.
Yeah, now there has been a bit of confusion really because this was sort of compared. This outbreak was compared to the super outbreak in April in 2011, where there was multiple EF5s, multiple EF4s, a huge outbreak caused huge destruction, millions and billions in sort of like reparations and repair damages. But so far, it's been quite tame. I mean, many tornado producing supercells haven't really produced any tornadoes, and if they have, it's been very short, very small, very thin tornadoes, which yes is what we like to see, but it just sort of begs the question: is do the NWS really know what was happening with this outbreak, or is it just sort of a guess? Because the amount of people that did compare this to the 2011 super outbreak is immense. And I saw it all over social media. Everyone was getting hyped up over some, thinking there'd be more EF4, EF5 sort of tornadoes, but we've seen one preliminary EF3 and a few EF2s as well, which yeah, it's just a bit confusing, really, as everyone thought there'd be a lot more tornadoes and a lot stronger tornadoes.
Yeah, it is something important to note about sort of weather in the US is it's very unpredictable. They can predict sort of what's going to happen, but they never truly know what's going to happen. And there's so many variables, like a slight gust of wind in the wrong direction could snowball, and a tornado could form, or a tornado that was going to form no longer forms. It's just so unpredictable that they can give a rough estimate of what's going to happen, but they're never going to really have a precise forecast.
Yeah, because there are so many like hooks on all these supercells, very strong hooks actually, some very mature hooks, some very big velocity couplets that just never produced a tornado, or if it did, it produced a like I said, a very small, thin tornado that lasted 5 seconds, barely touched the floor before it was lifted back up again. So yeah, everyone was very, very confused. There was sort of the maximum weather rating was about 200. So um, the higher basically that number is, the more severe the weather is. And last year it got up to about 800, 900 around May time. But yeah, either way, I was very confused. I mean, the people me and Joey watched, Ryan Hall, even he was getting a bit confused because there was just so many hooks and so much tornado potential that just didn't produce or didn't happen.
Yeah, even the National Weather Service got a little bit confused during this outbreak. I mean, I saw a video of a storm chaser getting hit by, it's called RFD, it's just a bit of wind flowing into a tornado that was completely unwarned. It had a velocity couplet, but because over the last few days or so, there's been so many velocity couplets without tornadoes. They were just being a little bit more cautious about warning an entire area. So it went completely unwarned until after this storm chaser got hit on live stream by a massive surge of wind rushing into the tornado. So it's a bit more dangerous considering that the National Weather Service is being a little bit uh, waiting for more confirmation as for tornadoes as opposed to just relying entirely on the radar because it's proved slightly less effective over the last week.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably been more damage from straight line winds themselves, well, itself, rather than tornadoes. There are videos of a roof being completely torn off, of like a shed or a bunker of some sort, just from these damaging straight line winds. And yeah, there just honestly was not that much tornado coverage. I mean, there's more floods and all that sort of stuff in severe weather rather than actual tornadoes. I remember I was watching Ryan Hall yesterday, and there was just so much flooding, but there just wasn't any tornadoes. There was, I think, about 5 or 6 tornado warnings in total, and that was about it in the space of a few hours. Yeah, I was ready to see some strong tornadoes and some good footage, and all these storm chasers would go under these rotations. They'd have beautiful view of these rotations, and then nothing would happen. So then go and drive to the next one, nothing would happen. Honestly, just nothing really happened other than flooding and some straight line winds. So yeah, it was a bit disappointing that not even some nice tornadoes formed over some rural areas that do no damage. Not even that happened. It was literally just a few weak tornadoes, sorry, rather than strong tornadoes. And I know Reed Timmer, he did chase one in the Dominator 3, but again, it was more like a dust cloud rather than really an actual tornado. But speaking of Reed Timmer, he mentioned the game Twisted constantly in his live stream. Now, Twisted is a Roblox game that me and Joey like to play quite a lot. And it's more of an arcade style game rather than a tornado simulator game. But Reed Timmer was convincing everyone that the IRL or in real life tornado chasing is like Twisted. Now, I personally disagree. Joey disagrees with me because obviously Ritamer is a professional storm chaser and I'm not. But I said to Joey, look, you're not every storm is going to produce EF3, EF4, EF5 tornadoes just like in the game. Now, me and Joey do re-roll the servers for higher days and more like destructive days. But either way, I think that I wouldn't go chasing real life tornadoes with Twisted knowledge because I think that that's very, very dangerous. And it's definitely, me and Joey are going to be doing a lot more actual research rather than playing Twisted before we go to America.
Yeah, I do find it quite intriguing how integrated the Roblox Twisted community is with the actual storm chasing community. I mean, inside of that Dominator 3 with Reed Timmer was a YouTuber called Jesse Gillett, who started off as a Twisted YouTuber. He made videos playing the game Twisted. He sort of just went on from there making cinematic videos with the Dominator 3 team and the Tiv 2 team. Um, it's just amazing how intertwined it is. But I suppose you have a free game that you can do semi-accurate tornado simulations in, and it's sort of bringing more eyes to the storm chasing scene, bringing more popularity, especially from the youth who may want to get into that in the future. It's just fun to see how integrated the communities are.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that a Roblox game would sort of get featured in a real life tornado chasing, but yeah, it's brought me and Joey closer and more of an understanding into tornadoes. But like I said, twisted knowledge, if you go out and use that in a real life chasing situation, there's a very high chance of you being injured or harmed in some sort of way because tornadoes in that game are completely different to how they would from how they would sort of move in real life. They still have the unpredictability of the real life. But other than that, it's not that realistic of a game. It's more made for fun rather than a simulator game. But we're going to move on to a typhoon in Guam, which Joey has a lot more information about.
Yeah, so this typhoon, actually bringing it a little bit back to Artemis 2, was caught on the Artemis 2 Orion capsule's cameras as it was returning to Earth, just in the corner, sort of at the top side of Earth. And a few days later, it strengthened rapidly into a super typhoon with wind speeds over 170 miles an hour in gusts, and it went over the island of Guam and some surrounding islands in that area. I haven't personally seen any pictures of the damage yet, which at least for me is a bit more concerning than if I was, because it shows they can't post any pictures. They might not have any uh, electricity or internet currently. I'm sure there are pictures online, people with like Starlink internet and stuff being able to post it, but I personally haven't seen any pictures from Guam of any of the damage. But I know it will be a lot because this is a super typhoon, which is basically a Category 5 hurricane or Category 4 hurricane, and these things going straight over an island, it's going to cause a lot of damage.
Yeah, now hurricanes and typhoons and those sort of things, they are very, very similar. I mean, they're pretty much the exact same. There are differences between them, but it's basically just more of where they are in the world rather than sort of, the names and that. If you look at a hurricane sort of from above and a typhoon from above, you probably can't particularly tell the difference unless you're like fully trained in, the NWS and or something like that. So it's not too different. But there are differences which we are actually going to get to in our main focus of this podcast. So, moving on to the main podcast, we have mentioned the recent tornado outbreak, and we're going to get into a bit more. We're also going to be discussing some other things about tornadoes, the difference between a tornado and a hurricane, sort of how tornadoes form and stuff like that. So, Joey, what do you think about this recent tornado outbreak? I know we have just briefly mentioned it, but now we are on the topic. What have you really thought of it so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to watch just because of how many false alarms there has been. You don't really get many false alarms. Well, you do get a lot of false alarms, but not this many false alarms in storm chasing. As much as weather is unpredictable, these storm chasers know exactly what they're looking for and know exactly what is coming next and where to go, where to look. And just to get this much unpredictability with it is somewhat unique. You don't really see it very often. I am glad that there hasn't been many destructive tornadoes. Most of it has been in fields. There's probably been some very strong tornadoes just in fields, but that's sort of the best case scenario. There's really strong tornado you can look at from a distance. It's not hurting anyone. You get good pictures of it, and then it lifts. But um, a lot of people I know watch storm chasing and are sort of looking forward to an EF5, which I mean we're all waiting to see an EF5 happen, but we don't want it to happen. And with this outbreak, we haven't had any of that. EF3 has been the highest preliminary yet. It could maybe be bumped up to an EF4 depending on how well built the houses are that it hit. But looking at the damage pictures, it didn't seem to have any anchor bolts, more so concrete sort of anchoring points, which as far as I'm aware, is EF3 damage, right? 160 mile an hour winds, something like that. So it's been an interesting one to watch, and I will continue watching it until this sort of outbreak is over.
Yeah, and we don't actually know when this outbreak will be over, but the days are getting a lot less severe and more moving into marginal and thunderstorm sort of days, rather than the slight and enhanced days that we've been seeing over the last week or so. But yeah, it's there has actually been many violent tornadoes in the past, including an EF0 that was a wedge tornado, but it just didn't hit, and it literally just went through fields. It was I've seen so many people think that it's a EF3, EF4, even EF5, and it might have been that strength. I mean, most wedges are EF3 plus, but because it just didn't hit anything, it got rated the lowest possible rating of a actually rated tornado. So you obviously have EFU below that, which is just a unknown rating, and then you have EF0, which just means that you can't really tell what the winds are, or it was just that weak.
Yeah, so tornadoes are very interesting. You said wedge tornadoes, which is basically just a tornado that is wider than it is tall. And that could be because of many factors. If the clouds are a lot lower, it doesn't have to be quite as wide. If the clouds are really high up in the sky, it's going to have to be a very wide tornado to account for that to be classed as a wedge. But even if it's not quite as wide as it is tall, you can sort of tell when people will start classing it as a wedge tornado. When that base of the tornado is just wide enough, people will start referring to it as a wedge regardless. But I mean, you can get different shapes of tornadoes. Do you want to take us a bit through what a tornado sort of is?
Yeah, so a tornado, which I was going to say actually, moving on to that sort of bit as we're talking about tornadoes. So basically, in the most basic form, a tornado is just rapidly spinning columns of air that go from the ground, well, from the cloud to the ground, from the ground to the cloud, depending on if it's a waterspout or a tornado. And sometimes you could say tornadoes are invisible. The tornadoes aren't really invisible. The only reason why you see the cloud is sort of like condensation, which is what you were telling me about the other day. But yeah, it is literally just a rapidly spinning column of air that is can be destructive as well. So yeah, in basically simple, in very simple broken down terms, it's just just air spinning around, spinning around, spinning around, all the way down to the ground. And yeah, the only reason why it's destructive is just because of how fast these winds are spinning. So when we say a tornado has 200 mile an hour wind speed, so technically yeah, four. Um, damage wind speeds. It just means that the air is going round at 200 mile an hour. Now it could definitely be more, but with the NWS, you can't always track directly how fast these tornadoes are spinning. You have to make a guess based on what it's hit. So if, like Joe was saying, like anchored into the ground concrete structures, if they get slabbed, that's high end EF4, low end EF5 sort of damage. But then again, you can never really tell. Now, we have mentioned before that the EF scale, and that is sort of based on damage and not wind speed. And me and Joey actually did have a discussion about this, didn't we? We said that they should definitely add a separate category, with tornadoes that people do have confirmed wind speeds on. So people have Doppler radar on wheels, known as DOWs. Now these can actually track pretty much to the dot the wind speed of that tornado, which is what they have done for many EF5 tornadoes and even lower tornadoes as well. So me and Joe think that there should be some tornadoes upgraded to either EF4, EF5, EF3. Just because of the DAOs simulating, or not simulating, but showing these wind speeds of a tornado.
Yeah, what a Dow has showed a lot of people, and even the National Weather Service themselves, all these meteorologists, is most tornadoes are a lot stronger than we think. It's just only for brief periods, like a gust inside of the tornado, or it doesn't hit anything. And the ones that do hit some things, it might not be at its peak strength when it hits them. And what Dow has showed is that the tornadoes on average are a lot stronger than we think. I mean, just in 2024 alone, they measured 300 plus miles an hour in a tornado. I was watching that one live. It was actually the first tornado that I watched the entire lifespan of it on a live stream, and it measured to be the strongest recorded winds in history of any storm, just over 300 miles an hour. And that's just the power of the Doppler on wheels. It shows you pretty much the direct wind speed. It's not entirely accurate. It is still using a similar mechanism to how standard US weather radars work. It's just a lot closer and a lot more focused on the tornado itself. So it's much more precise, but it's not exact, which is why if you ever see Doppler on wheels readings, it sometimes has a plus minus 5 or 10 miles an hour on it, just to account for that possible error.
Yeah, so the thing is with Doppler on wheels is that just that it's a lot smaller of a radar. So the ones you see in America stretch cities, they're huge, huge things, but they're just not that accurate. Now, they they will be accurate for the storm itself, but because a tornado is just such a small, condensed bit of spiraling air, it can't always track the wind speed. What the Doppler on wheels does really well, especially, is that it can get relatively close, and because that radar's so much smaller, it doesn't make it less advanced or anything, but it's just because it tracks such a much of a smaller range. It is just a lot more accurate. It's closer. It's a smaller radar, and it's as advanced as a radar of the ones that can track those huge areas. So yeah, it just makes everything more accurate. And I don't know if you know what tornado that was or what it got rated, but if that was anything below an EF5, and EF5 winds are 201 mile an hour, then it should be an EF5 automatically because the Doppler on wheels has tracked that at 300 mile an hour winds.
Yeah, so that was the Greenfield, Iowa EF4 tornado, and the reason it got an EF4 is just because it didn't hit anything at peak strength. It hit some things that had the strength in the structure to be blown over at EF4 strength. It might have been hit by 300 mile an hour winds, but there's not much more a tornado can do than completely wipe the foundation. So if your building is only built to withstand certain wind speeds, it's only going to show that it got hit by those wind speeds, which is just sort of the flaw with the EF scale. I know that it's a damage rating system. That's sort of what people care about more in the humanitarian sort of side of things. But in the meteorology side of things, I'm sure people would love a separate system for measuring exclusively the wind speeds measured on the Doppler on wheels or even through probes. I mean, there's like Reed Kemmer himself in the Dominator 3. He's got little rockets on top of his car that he launches and they fly into the tornado, and you can measure the wind speeds, the pressure, the temperature, all of that, and you can get much more precise wind speed measurements than even the Doppler on wheels with that because it is directly in the tornado at the time. So I think personally they should have another system, but keep the EF scale. The EF scale is a damage scale, and they should make a wind speed scale.
Yeah, because that's the thing. We're talking about these sort of tornadoes. So the Greenfield, Iowa EF4. There's also the El Reno 2013 that I know a lot of people glaze on TikTok, and that's not what we're here to do. What we are here to do is say that it definitely was EF5 strength. No one's denying that. It's the fact that it just went through an open field. It literally went down completely the opposite way to people expecting. So the wind and all the storms that day were moving northeast. This went southeast instead of going northeast, which is very strange. And all the chasers were waiting up here, so they all were waiting up here. The tornado formed and then just dipped basically below them, completely away from anyone, which is actually very good because it was one of the strongest tornadoes ever recorded in history from the Doppler on wheels, recording upwards of 300 mile an hour, probably a lot more above 300 mile an hour. But it was the one of the widest tornadoes ever. I think there have been some recorded tornadoes that have been wider, and I'm sure there probably has been years back in history that people just couldn't record. But yeah, so we just should have a separate sort of system, not for every single tornado, but every tornado that has had a radar scan through it, especially at its peak.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the El Reno 2013 tornado because we're on about the unpredictability, and that's what actually caused the storm chasers that got surprised by it to sadly get caught in the tornado and pass away. I mean, it's one of the only times we've seen storm chasers die because of tornadoes. They know exactly what they're doing when they are chasing these things. So for them to get caught up in a tornado just that quick is it just shows how quick it expanded to the 2 point something mile wide and just the unpredictability of it going the wrong direction and then actually at the end switching to the right direction and all the storm chasers were still north of it. It rapidly expanded towards them and moved towards them at the same time. They just had no chance to get out of the way, and that's the
That's chaser
unpredictability that
convergence as well.
is,
Well, we've mentioned before chaser
yeah.
convergence. There was a huge, absolutely huge miles of storm chasers trying to get out of the way of this tornado. because, like I said, they're in the completely wrong spot. They were going to go north and chase it, but unfortunately, it went like sort of directly for them. So there was miles of storm chasers getting out of this dirt road, with loads of dirt roads around it. So Reed Timmer, we have mentioned him many times today. He was chasing that tornado in the Dominator 2, as I believe the Dominator 3 was under repairs at that time, or was still being built at that time. He got very, very lucky. There was about 5 or 6 cars in a line with him, with many storm chasers, and with a few bit unfortunately passing away, like Joey said. Very experienced tornado chasers. But yeah, it's just there was just huge chaser convergence everywhere. I know many people died trying to escape this tornado. Because either they didn't have a safe spot, or I know there's a story of someone being really claustrophobic and they didn't want to get in the storm shelter. So what they tried to do was escape, outrun the tornado, which is the worst thing to do. I don't ever, never get in your car and try and outrun a tornado. But that's what they try and did. And unfortunately, the driver, not him, the driver who was driving him away, did unfortunately get ripped out the car, and did unfortunately pass away, along with a few other people, because of snapped power lines that went down in the road, basically halting everything. Um, the other storm chaser that did unfortunately pass away was Tim Samaras and his crew. So he's well known for, being a very strong tornado chaser. He had his whole life dedicated to getting information from tornadoes. So he talking about probes. He usually had a probes, and would put them in front of the tornadoes to get these pressure drops, to get these wind speeds, to get these temperatures. But because of the unpredictability of this tornado, it did end up unfortunately taking his life, and his son's life and his friend's life as well. Also, he was in the wrong car for that day. In a sense, he was in his Toyota instead of his main tornado chasing car. So again, that really adds to the unfortunate circumstances, as he was in a very underpowered Toyota trying to outrun one of the strongest tornadoes ever, and because of the strength of sub vortices, especially, one went directly over his car, and then the remains of his car, was basically nothing left, unfortunately.
Yeah, so you mentioned subvortices. Do you want to maybe explain what those are a little bit?
Yeah, so subvortices are basically just smaller but a lot stronger vortices that circle the main rotation, or the main vortex. Basically, what makes them so strong is that they are basically the tornado, but they're smaller, and they're so sort of like a drill bit tornado. They are so small and so compact, sort of hitting the ground harder. They're just so much more intense because they're smaller, but with the same wind speed, if not more, than the main tornado. It just makes it so much more damaging. You would rather be hit by the main core of the tornado rather than a subvortice, just because of how powerful these subvortices are. So yeah, they're just a smaller but more stronger version of the large tornado, or any tornado really. Now, with subvortices, a lot of people get them confused with dead man walking tornadoes. So what a dead man walking tornado is basically just the condensation making it, so to look like a man walking. Now there is videos of this, there's pictures of this. I'm sure we'll put a picture up on the screen right now, of a very infamous photo of a dead man walking. But yeah, so yeah, they're two completely different things, really. Subvortices, you usually have at least 5 or 6 per tornado. Now, you won't always see them, but actually, you brought up the Iowa EF4, which had many, many subvortices circling the main tornado. So I'm sure we'll probably put up a picture when Joey was talking about that, of that, and that, so you can always go back to that point, and see what we're talking about. I'm sure we'll put arrows towards it as well. But yeah, so with main big tornadoes, you can definitely get them on smaller tornadoes, but it's usually on the larger, wider, sort of 1 mile wide sort of tornadoes that you'll get these subvortices on, and they are just very, very powerful versions of the main vortex.
Yeah, there was actually several storm chasers that were caught inside of the El Reno 2013 tornado that were fine because they didn't get hit by these subvortices, but the ones that did, unfortunately, either got their cars rolled and were seriously injured, or like the Twistex team, Tim and Paul Stamaras, passed away. I mean, they were some of the most respected meteorologists and storm chasers on the planet, still are to this day. Just goes to show you how even people with decades of experience can still get caught out by these massive wedge tornadoes, rapidly expanding, changing directions, and a subvortices going straight over the car. It's just very unfortunate and just shows you just how careful these storm chasers need to be.
Yeah, because they're just so unpredictable. Now, there is videos, or some videos and pictures of the subvortice basically consuming their car. We're not going to show that at all, but there is there is a video on from Tornado TRX, which we mentioned before, with that sort of moment happening. So go check out his channel. No sort of promo here or anything, but yeah, go check out his channel about the El Reno tornado if you want to go see that for yourself. But yeah, very respected, very sort of legacy in the tornado chasing community, and he had huge intercepts before this tornado. But because of this unpredictability, basically what happened is the tornado was going straight sort of down, and then it literally just turned north out of nowhere, did basically a loop directly on his car, with all the subvortices as well. And that was that, unfortunately, because there was a guy in front of him. I can't remember his name, unfortunately. I'll put it up on the screen now. Who just about escaped by mere seconds, in his car. So yeah, it's such an unfortunate day, for El Reno. Now, luckily, it did disperse before it actually hit the city. It was basically on a direct course with the El Reno city, and luckily, it did suddenly just basically stop. It basically just collapsed and lifted. So it was a very unfortunate day for the storm chasing community, but minimal deaths occurred from El Reno itself, which is sort of the main thing. You don't want anyone dying in a tornado, but you would rather minimal people die rather than an entire city being slabbed by this 3 mile wide wedge.
Yeah, and fun fact, actually, the Twisters movie is based on what would happen if the El Reno 2013 tornado was actually going to hit El Reno. And uh, I'm not going to spoil the movie, but that's just basically what it's based on, is if that situation was actually going to occur slightly differently, and how it was actually supposed to happen if it didn't go the wrong direction, which actually happened more so because of the strength of the storm and the tornado actually diverting itself from the normal wind speeds because it was just powerful enough to pull itself a different direction.
Yeah, so do you want to talk us through about how do these tornadoes form? So obviously there's many different shapes, sizes of all these tornadoes, and how strong or weak it is. But do you want to just talk us through how just a basic tornado would form?
Yeah, so this is still sort of something people are still working on. It's not 100% understood. There's the basic principle of how it happens, and that's why we can predict when they're going to happen. And it's basically heat rising. You sometimes see it, dust devils are a great example of heat rising, causing sort of a spinning motion just based on uh, if there's like a branch in the way of a gust of wind, it's going to bend around that branch and it's going to start spinning. And if there's heat rising to just drag that spin up, it'll just run away with that spin and it'll spin even more. And it's sort of a runaway effect with that. Tornadoes as a whole, though, based on like from supercells, are slightly different in that they need the heat rising, but they also form from a storm, a supercell storm. And a supercell storm is basically just a thunderstorm that's got enough energy and is in the right atmospheric conditions to form a hook, which is you'll see on radars. It's sort of a hook shape, and at the bottom of that hook is typically where it will start rotating, and you'll see a tornado form.
So it sort of
Yeah,
looks
sort of like
like
that.
this.
Uh,
You could just see a hook at the bottom.
yeah, and I'll probably find a picture to put up on screen, but a hook is basically what every storm chaser will be looking out for on the radars. You can look out for it yourself if you go on Attic Radar on Google, and during a storm chasing day, a high risk or even a marginal risk day, um, and you sort of look where tornado warnings are, you click on a radar near it, and you'll probably see a hook shape. You don't always. Two storms can be sort of merged together. You don't get a hook shape, but the storm chasers know what they're looking for even in that scenario. But what will happen with the supercells is all of that turbulent air will feed into this storm, and as it's feeding into the storm, it will naturally just start to spin, and eventually spins enough that it starts moving down towards the ground.
So, can you tell us the difference between what a supercell is and what a thunderstorm is? Because even on these, high risk days, and even that, you can just get normal thunderstorms, but you can also get these super powerful supercells, that cause EF5 tornadoes. So, what's sort of the difference between the two?
Yeah, so it's just basically a matter of atmospheric conditions, right? If the atmospheric conditions are prime for thunderstorms, they don't necessarily have to be prime for a supercell. A supercell is a storm, but it's not necessarily just a thunderstorm. A thunderstorm can be just a thunderstorm. I mean, we had some in the UK as of yesterday. We didn't have any supercells, but we had thunderstorms. If all of that is called inflow, and if inflow is moving towards the thunderstorm, which is why in some movies, like older movies or even tornado videos, you'll hear people saying if the wind is going towards the storm, uh, that's when you should probably worry. Uh, that's called inflow, and it's basically all the wind going towards this thunderstorm, and it starts to take the shape with the hook, and when it becomes a supercell. And these things form a lot quicker than normal thunderstorms because normally they form in uh, the atmospheric conditions are right for very quickly developing thunderstorms. A lot of energy in the atmosphere that's called CAPE, convective atmospheric potential energy. Um, it's just basically how much energy these storms can bring into themselves and form tornadoes with. I know that the UK, yesterday, I was actually talking to my tutor about it. I was talking with him, predicting against the weather app's own judgment, saying there's probably going to be thunderstorms because we was going to have 600 CAPE. And we got thunderstorms with that pretty much across the UK. And in America, you get in these places with thousands of CAPE, sometimes like upwards of 5,000 CAPE. And you just can imagine all of that energy going into one storm. It's gonna form a tornado.
Now, you mentioned the UK, and we are actually the most tornado per like square kilometer prone country. Now, we were speaking about this the other day about how we have so much energy in our atmosphere that it basically just breaks the whole supercell thing, which is why we only get weak tornadoes, or which is why we just get thunderstorms. So, do you want to more like elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the UK is, as you said, the place in the world with the most tornadoes per square kilometer. Now, we don't get the most overall, but we are small enough and get enough that compared to places like the United States, we get more per area. We get about 100 or so per year. I know that a lot of people in the UK don't believe that. They say it's not a tornado, that's just a funnel. But as you also said earlier, just because you can't see a tornado doesn't mean it's not on the ground. Just because the funnel's not touching the ground doesn't mean the spinning column of air is not. And that's what classes it as a touchdown tornado. And if it doesn't touch down, it's just a funnel. But the UK gets just over 100 tornadoes per year. And that's just because we have sometimes got the atmospheric conditions for it. However, because of where we are, we're getting all the winds from the ocean, and it's not ideal conditions for long track sustained tornadoes. So they do rip apart pretty quickly. They're not long track. The strongest we've had in a while was the Birmingham tornado in, I believe, the early 2000s. It was EF3 strength. Um, you're looking at America with like EF5s. It got one of the tornadoes from 2024 or 2025 actually got up to an EF5 tornado. And in the UK, in modern times, we've only had up to an EF3, mainly because they just do not have enough time to strengthen, because our atmosphere is actually incredibly unstable. It's why our weather changes so quick. It's like, I remember when the thunderstorm started firing up yesterday, it started raining, hailing, and thundering within the span of 5 seconds of each other, and then after 10 minutes, it was bright and sunny again. We just have such unstable atmospheric conditions that these tornadoes do not have time to form properly or strengthen.
Yeah, and honestly, I just really want to see tornado in the UK, especially around my area. Not a destructive one, but even if I just saw a funnel, that'd be something so cool that we could put a picture of on the podcast of a funnel such tornado that we've seen. Now, I have seen tornadoes and water spouts before when I was a lot younger, but unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of that because I was like 8 years old. I didn't even have a phone or anything then. So I have seen tornadoes and water spouts before, as my area is actually in a higher risk of tornadoes than a lot of places, and I am at the very bottom of our tornado alley or our main tornado alley. So we do have about three different tornado alleys. With sort of London sort of being in the dead centre. Now we do have we have had an EF4 in London back in very olden days, sort of 100 odd years ago, and that is the sort of that's the strongest that we've ever recorded. Now, yeah, we could have had stronger. We don't know, but that is the EF4 is the strongest we've ever recorded. But Birmingham, like you said, was in the last 20 odd years, which is the modern sort of times that we've been able to track. But yeah, it would be so cool. I have actually had rotation above my house before, and I'm not sure if I have the photo of it. If I can find it, I will put the photo out. But I was watching a thunderstorm last year come across my house. Literally went right over the top of my house, and there was very, very slow spinning clouds going very slowly. Now, I don't believe it ever formed a tornado, but that is because rotation doesn't always form a tornado. But rotation is basically the very first step of sort of forming an actual tornado. If we take out sort of the hook and all that sort of stuff, but to actually form the tornado, the rotation is sort of the first thing. But like I said, rotations don't always form tornadoes.
Yeah, there is a chance that my house actually got hit or nearly hit by a small, weak tornado a few years ago. I think 1 or 2 years ago. I remember just sitting here actually, and then I heard a lot of noise outside, a lot of wind and leaves moving around. I went to my window and saw like basically all the leaves on the trees outside spinning around, going straight over my house. It was going across my window, but it was so brief, and I didn't even think to go outside and look up in the sky to see if I could see it. But that was probably the closest I've got to seeing like a funnel in my with my own eyes. And it's a unique story to tell people that my house might have been hit by a tornado. It might have been what's called a gust tornado, which is basically just a gust of wind that hits the right things to spin up a little bit of vortex. But it's cool to see nonetheless. Now, I have come somewhat close to seeing a tornado before. I was in Spain once, and I remember I was downstairs in the hotel we were at, and it started hailing out of nowhere. And these hailstones were some of the biggest I've seen. I know compared to the ones you get in like America, it wasn't too big, but it was at least the size of like a coin, like a maybe 10p coin. And I remember seeing that and going, "Oh, that's really cool," because I love storms. But then I later found out that across the water a waterspout tornado actually went straight across where my hotel room would have had a great view. So if I wasn't downstairs, I would have seen a waterspout go right across the line of sight. And I had my camera with me at the time, so I would have been able to get great pictures. But unfortunately, it was unlucky that I was downstairs at the time.
Yeah, no, that is really awesome, and yeah, like I said, I've seen water spouts before, but before I had a phone or even a camera to take photos of it. Well, I did actually have a camera, but I didn't have it with me. But yeah, it's something that me and Joey really want to see in the future. So, do you want to take us through some of our plans that we have made so far for the future?
Yeah, so we've not actually like scheduled anything because it's far in the future because I mean we're both going through education
Yeah.
still. We both don't have any like means of affording to go to America. But hopefully one day in the future, maybe 5 or 10, like 5 to 10 years in the future, to go storm chasing ourselves. By that point, we'll have much more knowledge on the topic and know what to look out for. And we'll definitely do it in the safest first time storm chasing way possible. We have big lenses anyway, so we don't need to get too close. I don't know many aviation photographers that have gone storm chasing with their massive lenses before, so we'll sort of have that going for us. We can be a bit further away than everyone else. Um, we do have a friend over there that will probably get to drive us or will utilize his car because taking a rental car to storms with big hail where you can dent your car, probably not a good idea. I know Reed Tim has done that a few times to the point where he now has to pay a little bit more on the deposit when he rents cars, and he is banned from a few rental places, I believe, just because he keeps bringing back the cars with big dents in it and the windshield's cracked. So that's why he normally brings his armored car that's basically a tank. But yeah, that's basically our plan for the future: is go storm chasing in America, look at some tornadoes, hopefully, maybe um, get some good pictures of them as well.
Yeah, now what we're going to do is we're going to go over there on a humongous high day where we're going to get EF5 tornadoes and we're going to get flown across America. No, but what we're hoping, and you're not supposed to go first time storm chasing on a high day, but if that's what it ends up being, then we will not be complaining. And like we said, we don't even need to get that close to it. We can be quite far away and still get some good photos because of the size of our lenses. Um, But I know you're talking about hail actually, and how reed timber is banned from places. What you can do is actually put some sort of like mesh on the top of your car, and all that basically does is it hits the metal of that instead of hitting your car and denting them. Because some of the hail you can get out there is like baseball size hail, so like something that you can fit in like the palm of your hand. I know we put an image of the huge hail from a few weeks ago up on the screen. It can get up to that size, and when that's hitting you at like basically terminal velocity, that does some huge damage to your car or truck or whatever you're chasing in. So yeah, when we go over there, I'm sure we'll probably put some sort of metal sort of plating or sheet on the top of it.
Yeah, the reason they normally go with a mesh is because the gaps in the mesh are small enough that hail, when it'll hit that and get split into smaller chunks, and those smaller chunks are small enough that it won't do any damage to your car. But that's why they use a mesh and not a sheet, because they can still see through it. Um, Smaller hail can still get through it, so it's not piling up on the top of the car. But hail that's too big will get broken into smaller pieces, and it won't damage the car.
And obviously, it also saves the windshield as well, because what you do is you put it slightly over the front. So you put it over the top of your car and over the front. So your windshield's like here or whatever, and it's just over the top. So it protects the windshield, because even the smallest bit of hail over there, there's just so much of it that it just cracks the windscreen. And that is basically it for you, because you can't really be chasing with a completely cracked windscreen, because it's just not safe, really, and it's not something that you really want to be doing. And it can cost a lot of damage if you just leave it there and more hail hits you. Um, so I'm sure one of us, me and Joey, will probably be driving. Possibly, it just sort of depends on how confident our other friend is at driving in these tornadoes. Because me and Joey will have probably a lot more knowledge than him by that time. But yeah, so we'll try and avoid the hell cores and stuff like that, and try and just stick outside the storms and go for the hooks and the tornadoes. But yeah, at the end of the day, you can't always help it, because you do have to go sort of from storm to storm, and you do have to drive through these hail cores with this huge hail, unfortunately. But yeah, me and Joey do have this big plan, and hopefully the podcast will still be around by then, and we'll probably live stream it, to be fair. After the first few days of us learning it, and it will be on our YouTube. But hopefully, it'll be a bit more popular by then, and a lot more people can tune in as we try and educate you about these tornadoes as we're chasing them.
Yeah, the thing about storm chasing is you sort of have to be there for a little bit of, like, a decent bit of time, like weeks, sometimes even months, because tornado season is quite long, but it's also spread out. You don't get 6 months of a lot of tornadoes per day. You get maybe a week of a bunch of tornadoes, 2 weeks of one or two tornadoes, and then another week of a bunch of tornadoes. And it's so widespread throughout tornado season that you could go for a month chasing tornadoes and not see a single tornado if you're unlucky. I mean, even people that read timber and stuff have days where there's a bunch of tornadoes happening somewhere else, but he's just too far to get to them in time, or if he's maybe not there on a specific day, and then a bunch of really powerful tornadoes turn up at that day. It's just a matter of getting lucky. So being there for as long as possible just increases your chances of seeing them.
Yeah, now we're probably going to go there for around a month, which is sort of the maximum we can do. That's pretty much all our leave from work. Or we might have to, leave work, then try and go back into work or something like that. But we're planning to go there for quite a long time, for at least a month, maybe a bit more, if possible. We'll probably go around sort of end of April, start of May, as in that is when you're most likely to see more tornadoes. However, that is more than one tornado season, so usually you get one around sort of April to June time, early like so sort of end of March, start of June time. Then you also get one around sort of September, October time, when things start to cool back down to that temperature, where you have the cold coming from the north and the super tropical coming from the south, and where they converge. Because obviously tornadoes can't really happen when it's too hot. Again, it also can't happen when it's too cold, but there are those about 5 months in the year where you can get where the conditions are basically perfect.
Yeah, and you mentioned different like tornado seasons, but there's also different tornado alleys in America. You have the conventional tornado alley, which, actually important to note, is moving over the last sort of 15, 20 years or so. The track map, like they make a map of all the tornado tracks that year, and if you actually look at it each year from, like, say 20 years ago to now, the actual main line of tornadoes is shifting east, and that's just because the Mediterranean Sea is the temperature in the Mediterranean is like shifting slightly. This happens sometimes based on historical records, but it happening right now is just causing the tornado alley that we've all heard of to actually shift east. It's making one of the other tornado alleys in America known as Dixie Alley, which is more, if you can imagine tornado alley going through sort of the central states north to south. Dixie Alley is southeast of that, covering those southeastern states, like just north of Florida and Texas, and in between those sort of area. That's becoming actually much more active due to the fact that Tornado Alley is basically merging with it. Um, so maybe by the time we go storm chasing there, it might just be Dixie Alley that's like necessary to chase. Fortunately, there is, as far as I'm aware, more major cities in the east of the US than in the center of the US, so it is more risky for um, cities and stuff that the alley is shifting that way. But hopefully, it starts to shift back soon. I think meteorologists are confident that it will. So we might see the conventional tornado alley back again.
I wouldn't particularly say that it's shifting, but it's definitely sort of adding on. So there's sort of actually there is a lot of debates whether it is shifting or whether it's sort of connecting. So some people are saying that it is just shifting over. Some people are saying that just that bit where there is been more tornadoes is adding on. But you can't really tell, to be honest, because tornadoes are also so unpredictable. So yes, some years you might have some more over here, some you might have more over here. You know, you can't really say that it's shifting. It is just completely random on where mainly there is just a huge sort of line of where you can get tornadoes. It's just where it happens in that sort of area. So yeah, it's not really particularly shifting, but there is definitely it is sort of being added onto by that extra section moving sort of east, because you still do get a lot of tornadoes up by Oklahoma City and Texas and all that sort of original tornado alley.
Yeah, I mean, even as of yesterday, the tornadoes we were on about earlier with this outbreak in Iowa, that is in the conventional tornado alley that we all have heard of before. It's just a lot of meteorologists do think there's some meteorologists that disagree with it, but yeah, there are a lot that do agree that it is shifting, and that's just based on, as much as tornadoes are unpredictable, if you look at 20 years of tornadoes, you can sort of get an average of it slightly moving east. And now this could just be weather patterns. I mean, we go through solar cycles every like 11 years or something like that. So there's always other factors at play. But as far as I'm aware, a lot of meteorologists do think that it is sort of slowly drifting east.
Yeah, but we are going to quickly move on to sort of more tornado. So things like velocity couplets and gust fronts. So Joey, do you want to take us a little bit through that?
Yeah, so a velocity couplet is actually one of the most important indicators as to whether a tornado is forming and or on the ground. And it's basically if you go on a radar in America and you select velocity, the way they get the velocity is by firing out radar like waves at these storms, and due to as they are called Doppler radars, the Doppler effect is basically if something is moving towards you, I'm sure you can hear it with an ambulance. If an ambulance is driving past you, as it's coming towards you, it's higher pitched, and then once it passes you, it gets to lower pitched. They basically use the same effect by bouncing waves off of raindrops, and if the raindrop is going towards you, it shifts the wave, like shifts the frequency slightly, and they can pick up on that, and it tells them which way the raindroplets are moving. And if you look on a radar in the US, one half of it is green and one half of it is red. The green is stuff moving towards the radar, I believe, and the red is moving away from the radar. So the reason that it's green and red is you can imagine a storm moving over the radar. On one side it's moving away, on the other side it's moving towards, and that's why you get that sort of big green and red circle. But if you look at a storm on this velocity radar, if you look at a hook, sometimes you will see that on one side of that, so just let's say just on the red side, you might get a bit of green, and that just means that there is movement going opposite to what the storms and wind speeds are doing. And sometimes you get a green and red circle that is small enough that it fits inside of one of those hooks, and that is a velocity couplet. Now, the color of those semicircles, the color of those will determine the wind speeds that it's measuring, and you can sort of gauge whether it's just formed or whether there's a tornado on the ground or not based on how strong this velocity couplet is. One with high velocities are stronger couplets, and typically those stronger couplets are the ones with tornadoes.
Yeah, and they don't just have to be red and green. You can sort of get to blue and sort of a beige color. Basically, it just if you go so green and red is basically the most basic form, and it's something that you're going to see in every single velocity couplet, every single storm. It is literally just that there is a cloud there or there is rain there, you know. But when you get strong, you can tell that it's a very strong velocity couplet because on one side it's going to be beige, one side it's going to be dark blue, and that's the ones you have to be worried about. Now they won't always be that, and you can get strong tornadoes even with sort of mid velocity couplets, even with just red and green. But when you start seeing these darker colors or brighter colors, depending on which side it's on, you can sort of tell that it's a stronger couplet, a tighter couplet, and something to be worried about, and something that can or probably will form a large tornado. But yeah, like Joey said, I think he explained the radar very very well. Basically, they will just fire beams at the clouds. It will then return, and it tells you if the cloud's moving towards or away from you. So obviously they'll always usually start off green as they go like that, and then it'll basically just swap because once the clouds have gone past them, now they're moving away. So it will start off green and then go red. But when it's actually directly above you, when the clouds are sort of like up here, it is very annoying because it will split it in half. So this side will be like green and this side will be red. But that obviously does not necessarily mean rotation. Rotation is very sort of prevalent on radars, and you can definitely usually see um, where a rotation is from these velocity couplets.
Yeah, there is a few other signs you can find out if it is rotation you're looking at. There's stuff like differential reflectivity, but I'm personally not too caught up on what everything means. I'm into storm chasing and all that meteorology and stuff, but I don't know everything, and I'm not 100% sure what the differential reflectivity is. But I know that if there is a tornado on the ground and it has debris in it, you can pick it up on uh,
Yeah.
either correlation coefficient or differential reflectivity, and you can also sometimes pick it up on the standard radar, which shows you the rain, because you can get a debris ball, which you do not want to see, and that's basically there is so much debris inside of that tornado that the radar confuses it for hail. You get this when it hits like a town, or even if it's just hitting like a really dense like forest or woods with a lot of branches flying around, it can sometimes mistake it for hail. But the stronger the hail debris ball, the more debris that is floating around and the more damage is on the ground. So you'll see if you see clips of meteorologists on like doing weather forecasts and stuff on TV, and they see a debris ball, you'll see their reaction. They really do not like seeing debris balls, and that is just something that if you are watching the radars, just to watch out for. If you see a velocity couplet going over a populated area, you might just see a debris ball, and that's a pretty much confirmation that there is a tornado on the ground doing damage.
Yeah, so obviously, like you said, we have velocity radars, we have reflectivity radars. But basically, the debris ball is mainly prevalent. So it'll be a sort of a red, completely red map, usually, and then you'll see just a blue ball sort of in the middle of it, and that's when you can tell that there's a debris ball there for certain. And it's something that you can just so easily pick up when you're switching to all these different radars. Um, and yeah, it's just something that you do not want to see, but it is something that is easily detectable. And you can also see it on the with the velocity couplet. So sometimes those darker areas can be debris that have just gone so high into the clouds, and like Joe said, the radars are confusing them with like hail and all of that, which makes these darker. But yeah, you can get observed tornadoes, you can get radar indicated tornadoes. So yeah, not all tornadoes will always be observed because there's just no storm chasers on it, or there's no confirmed chasers or anything on it. So then you just get something that's called a radar indicated. So usually you hear a radar indicated rotation, then you hear a radar indicated tornado, and it's basically just the radar seeing that there's a tornado there rather than an actual person seeing the tornado.
Yeah, so moving a bit sort of back onto the velocity couplets, I actually got a screenshot on the radar of a velocity couplet from the typhoon, because where it hit there was a weather radar, and I luckily managed to get it at the right time. That I got the very strong velocity couplet. If we find the picture, we'll put it up on screen. Just the amount of different colors on that couplet, um, and that just shows you the strengths of these things. You look at tornadoes, the velocity couplets for those can be red and green, and it can still do EF2, EF3 damage, maybe even EF4 or 5. And this hurricane near Guam had dark brown colors, which is pretty much nearing the maximum that Attic radar will display. So you get the same sort of thing with hurricanes, just a lot bigger, which actually sort of brings us on to one of the things we had, which was tornadoes versus hurricanes. And those I hear get brought up a lot because people sort of, especially people not into meteorology, just sort of see hurricanes as big tornadoes. But they are not. They are very different things. You can get tornadoes inside hurricanes because the atmosphere is spinning. There's a lot of energy, and they're unstable. But a hurricane itself is formed by low pressure zones in the atmosphere going over a warm part of the ocean. And since heat rises, it sort of starts spinning around that low pressure zone. And over time, it develops and gets stronger and stronger. And you can get several 100-mile wide hurricanes with 200-mile-an-hour winds. But something that is unique with tornadoes is they are small, concentrated, and because they are focusing all that energy in such a small area, they are a lot stronger too. The highest recorded wind speeds on Earth, natural wind speeds, were from tornadoes, not hurricanes, just because of how much more sort of energy dense these tornadoes are.
Yeah, which is why, like we said earlier, like drill bits and subvortices are like the usually where you will get these strongest winds, just because of how condensed they are. Like the spinning columns of air are so small, but they're spinning so fast, and it just basically makes it faster because they're in such a smaller place. So with wedges and that, they're very very large, very they might not be slow. They might still have 300-mile-an-hour winds, but because they're so wide, it goes like this. Like, but with like drill bits and that, it's like this because it's just it's just so close together. And with hurricanes, they like it stretches states rather than like roads. So yeah, with a hurricane it'll be like this big, and then a tornado will be like tiny. Like absolutely minuscule compared to a hurricane, which is why tornadoes will always have higher wind speeds. If we're talking about the highest ever recorded from tornado and hurricane. And yeah, it's I guess I can see how people think hurricanes are just big tornadoes, because it is literally just spinning air going around and around. But there are very noticeable differences, really, with hurricanes and tornadoes, like Joey's just sort of explained there.
Yeah, and one of the major differences that people often don't know about, and something that's more of a recent observation because we've now got the technology to see inside of a tornado. Unlike a hurricane, there is no eye of a tornado. It is dark, dusty, and windy inside of a tornado. There's no sort of period where there's no wind. There's just wind and more wind, and you can't see anything. And your ears pop. Your ears tend to pop in a tornado. That's just because it's a low pressure zone in the middle. Similar to taking off on an airplane, the pressure drop will make your ears pop. But we've only recently sort of got eyes inside of a tornado to see that there is no eye of a tornado. I know a lot of older movies like
Yeah.
Twister, they depict an eye of a tornado. Into the Storm, I believe, also depicts an eye of a tornado. But these movies just came out before we knew that there wasn't an eye of a tornado, and it's one of the biggest known misconceptions. Another one of the major misconceptions is people going under overpasses or bridges during a tornado. I know that they used to teach that in tornado safety videos back in like the 1980s, 1990s sort of area. But that's the worst thing you can do in a tornado. And meteorologists in like modern times have to keep trying to preach that you shouldn't do that because all these old safety videos told you should. No one believes them saying you shouldn't, but it actually just makes a wind tunnel effect. You can imagine all the wind hitting that bridge will funnel down underneath the bridge and actually just make the wind speeds higher. The only time that getting under those overpasses is more safe than not is if it has something called girders, which is just sort of little compartments you can hide in uh, between concrete and concrete on all sides. But a lot of them don't have those, so it's better to just keep driving away from the tornado as opposed to hiding under a bridge. And also hiding under a bridge stops every car behind you. They're out in the open and can't go anywhere. They're stuck in possibly debris or hail, getting the car pelted with rocks, trees. Like, it's just one, sort of selfish to do because you're blocking everyone else's cars, but two, it's actually more dangerous for you. So that's one of the most like dangerous misconceptions about tornadoes that meteorologists have been preaching do not do this for the last 20 years.
Yeah, and it basically just creates a vacuum effect, really. And I know I see this on so many, like when I'm watching Ryan Hall, like he has like loads of traffic cams all over the, usually by like overpasses and stuff like that, and he'll like click on one, and there's just a massive bunch of cars just like stopped under an underpass, and you see all this massive queue of traffic that's gone out of there just because these few people at the front have stopped under these underpasses, and it's just like the worst thing you can possibly do, like Joey just said. It just is, it's just so much worse for you because you get higher wind speeds. You're more likely to die if you go under an underpass rather than if you just keep driving. Now, if you drive directly into the tornado, then yeah, obviously. But if that tornado goes like even close to that underpass, then you're in much more danger than if it went directly over you, just because of it creates much higher wind speeds and, like Joey said, like a wind tunnel effect.
Yeah, even in modern movies such as Twisters, the intro to that involves people going under the overpasses. But the important thing to note with those is they had girders, they had a place to hide. And in that film, one of the people who isn't in the girders does get taken by the tornado. So I guess they are sort of trying to spread the message that you shouldn't do that unless there's girders. But I feel as though the public might just take that as go under an overpass because that's what they do in the film.
Yeah, it's just not. There's been many, many, many deaths, like hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths from people hiding under underpasses and overpasses. It is just something that it's so hard to get people to not do because it seems like a logical option. It seems like you're underneath something, and it seems like that it's just it'll be harder for you to get picked up or something. But it's actually the complete opposite. And yes, in theory it would make logical sense, but like actual practice, if that happens, then like we just said, you have so much higher of a chance of dying or even being injured just from doing that.
Yeah, it's happened in many, many outbreaks as well, especially 2011 and 2013, which were sort of the major recent outbreaks that we've had. Another 2013 one made the El Reno 2013 tornado that was 2 point something miles wide. There was also the 2011 El Reno tornado that was EF5, as far as I'm aware, and that one was more worst case scenario because it did go through El Reno, but it's definitely less damage than what would have happened if the 2013 one
Yeah.
went through El Reno. Um, but 2011 was definitely a bad year for tornadoes. You had the Joplin tornado, which was the costliest tornado. It was not a good time for the US in
There's also a
2011 for tornadoes.
documentary about the Joplin tornado. I remember seeing that. I can't remember what it's called, but I watched it back when it first released. And there's literally a whole documentary about people coming home from school because there was like a graduation that day. People coming home from that. There was people at like restaurants as well. Because the thing is, when you're inside a restaurant as well, there's not usually that many windows, especially if you're sat at the back. So people had no idea what was happening. And then all these tornado sirens come on. They look outside and there's just this massive tornado heading directly through the dead center of Joplin, and like Joe said, it's the most destructive, and it killed so many people as well. And it was a very, very unfortunate day in the Joplin community and just the tornado community.
Yeah, there's several good videos, sort of documentary style videos that I've seen on the Joplin tornado, and you just can't really see it's just a wall of rain because this tornado was what they call rain wrapped, which is much more dangerous because it just looks like a wall of rain, but behind that rain curtain there is a 200-mile-an-hour plus tornado spinning and destroying everything in its path, but all people on the outside can see is a wall of rain, which just made it that much more dangerous because people took it less seriously because they didn't know it was there.
Yeah, but we're going to quickly move on because we are running out of time. So, final thing that we're going to talk about is the Otis project, and we are actually in talks with them about getting them on the podcast after tornadoes or after this main tornado season. So around sort of like July, August time. They said to message them again, so they're happy to come on the podcast, and hopefully we will be getting them on to sort of discuss their thing. But basically, what they do is they fly drones into the tornado. So, like you said earlier, Ritama uses rocket probes to go into the tornado. But these guys use drones that go in the tornado with pressure sensors, temperature sensors, wind sensors, and it's crazy to think that they don't just lose signal instantly. Like they will fly this drone around the tornado like for a good 5-10 minutes before it loses signal, getting all this valuable data. And the drones aren't that expensive, you know. We're talking about the ones in like Ukraine and Iran and all that. They cost like 100 quid, you know. Now, obviously, you don't want to be selling 100 quid per tornado, but it gets valuable data, and I'm sure they probably get paid by like the NWS and things like that to fund their project.
Yeah, I've been keeping up with the Otis project sort of since it started, or at least since like the early days of it. And they've got some incredible footage from it already. I know that they've, as of I think yesterday or the day before, during this recent outbreak, actually for the first time ever, flew a 360 camera into a tornado on a drone. So they're really working on the footage aspect of things as well as the data aspect of things. But they are I'm just personally surprised that they even survive these tornadoes. You see in the videos pieces of grass and leaves flying around, and one rock is taken out that drone, and it's just surprising to me that they are strong enough to withstand those pieces of debris and high wind speeds.
Yeah, and it's one of the best projects that I think I've ever seen for tornadoes. You get valuable data without risking any human life. Yeah, you risk your money, but like would you rather risk your money or would you rather risk yourself, you know? So yeah, you're getting very valuable data for a minimal cost and a no human life factor, and I think that drones could become the way of the future for some tornado chasing, because it just doesn't put your life at risk, and it's probably more cheaper to do drones than it is to do all the refueling prices, the repair prices, probe prices for your car and all that sort of stuff. So it's one of the best projects, and me and Joey are both really excited to see how it goes. And like I said, hopefully we'll get them on the podcast in the future.
Yeah, I'll be keeping up with all of their videos and stuff. I've seen pretty much every video they've posted showing their footage from inside of these tornadoes. And it's not just weak tornadoes. You think a drone won't survive a strong tornado, but they've gone in EF2 plus strength tornadoes and survived. They've brought the drones back, landed them, and reused them. And just the fact that they are able to do that just shows how much they are dedicated to making this work.
Yeah, I think they have actually been in one or two EF4 tornadoes, if not very high level EF3 tornadoes. And yeah, like I said, it's just so surprising. These drones weigh like a few kilograms you can hold in your hand really easily. And you think that, oh, they're just going to get swept away, they're just going to get picked up and you can't fly them and they lose signal. But no, they actually fly around in that tornado getting really good data for, like I said, 5 to 10 minutes at a time with footage as well. So yeah, it's such a really good project, and I'll be keeping close eye on it as well. So moving on to our final segment here, we really do hope you enjoyed the last segment, as we did put a lot of effort into that, and we both think it went pretty well. But we're going to move on. So the last week's Takeoff Thursday that we couldn't obviously do because Joe was on holiday contains of the Gripen from the Swedish Air Force, the BBMF, and the RAF Typhoon. Now, the Gripen is basically just the sort of Nordic Swedish version, mainly used by Sweden as it is its main fighter jet, of the sort of Typhoon and Rafale. So it's just one of the three sort of Europe's fighter jets with canards and that, and it's being compared to the F-35. So the latest version, the JAS 39E Gripen, sort of has these. It's not a stealth aircraft, but it's more stealthy than the Typhoon, Rafale, F-18, Su-27, these sort of aircraft. But I just don't think it's quite up to the F-35 standard, because obviously it doesn't have any internal weapons base, so it does have to carry all its missiles on its wings. Um, But personally, I don't really think there's too much difference between the Typhoon, Rafale, and Gripen. They are basically the exact same fighter jet developed by different nations, with obviously the Typhoon being produced by Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK, with a few other smaller nations joining in with that. The Rafale being basically all French, and the Swedish Gripen being basically just all Swedish, with a few help from other countries. But yeah, it's there's a lot of upgrades. I think the Gripen's probably going to last the longest out of the three aircraft, as we're already thinking about retiring the Typhoon. Within the next 10 years, depending on when we need it, how we need it, to move more onto the F-35 and our Tempest fighter that we're basically making all by ourselves. Germany, Italy, and Spain, I don't think have any plans of retiring the Typhoons, and I think Spain are retiring their Aviate-B Harriers within the next few years. As well, like we mentioned a few weeks ago. So the Typhoon will sort of take over that role with the F-18. Germany, with their EF-2000, they're continually improving that, and Italy as well. And with the Dassault Rafale, that's really a really good aircraft. I think the only carrier capable version of these three jets. But yeah, the Swedish Gripen is always a great display to hear, because you get the blue note sounds, you get the sort of the whew as it goes past the crowd. Hopefully you could hear that. If not, we'll probably put like a video up on the screen of the blue note of the aircraft. The Typhoon we have mentioned many times before, but we're going to talk about it just quickly, because it is also going to Little Granston Air Show for, I believe, the first time ever since the show started. Which is awesome, because usually I've never seen a fast jet there. Usually the Jet Provost or Vampire or both go, but I've never seen the Typhoon go there before, so that's going to be awesome to see. And it is also going to Riyadh, which is the second Typhoon announcement after the German EF-2000 from a few weeks ago. And the final one is the BBMF with the Dakota, Spitfire, and Hurricane. Obviously, the Lancaster is in repairs right now for this entire display season, so we won't be seeing that. The Dakota is basically just the replacement for the Lancaster for this year, which I really liked. I really need to see, because I have not seen the Dakota in many, many years. It was supposed to go to Midlands Air Festival last year, but because of technical issues, it couldn't, unfortunately. So it's something that I missed out on last year. But it is going to Midlands this year, hopefully, and it is also going to Riyadh. Now, Joey is going to quickly take you through our static announcements.
Yeah, so going back to the Gripen, they have the Gripen as a static. They also have a Cessna 152 as a static, which I believe I spoke to the people with my mum who brought that last year. We had a nice lengthy conversation about what they do and sort of things like that. The Cessna T-41A Mescalero, I probably mispronounced that. Um, so the two Cessnas as a static for this announcement, and the Slingsby T-66 Nipper, probably mispronounced that as well. So three prop aircraft and the Gripen as statics for last week's Takeoff Thursday. So overall, I think last week's Takeoff Thursday was shaping up for the fighter meet theme, and it's shaping up to be a good react.
Yeah, so just quickly, I'm going to move on to the next load of announcements, because we have the Harvard as well. The Harvard is flown by David Peters, which I have seen last year at Midlands as well. I don't believe he's flying Wacky Rabbit this year, as it looks like on the announcement that he's flying a silver and yellow version of the Harvard. So we'll have to wait and see when we get to Midlands. But from what we can see off of Midlands announcements, it is the silver one. Now, there is one final Midlands announcement, not from this week, but that's on Saturday. So that will be our next week's podcast. So one more announcement for Midlands after the one we're about to speak about in a minute. But yeah, David Peters and the Harvard will be an amazing display. It always is. I love the Harvard. We have mentioned it before, but it's a training aircraft used by a lot of Commonwealth nations, like the Chipmunk, which Joe is going to take you through in a minute. Mainly used by places like Canada, America, which have the Texan variant of the Harvard, the UK, Australia, and places like that. Now, just quickly, we have also got the BBMF for Hampshire Air Show, so that also got announced last week. Or 2 weeks ago. So yeah, we sort of quickly mentioned that on the topic of the BBMF going to Riyadh and Midlands. So yeah, it's going to Hampshire. Now, Joey, do you want to take us through the statics for this week's Takeoff Thursday?
Yeah, so we have the McDonnell Douglas F4E Phantom, which I can't wait to get some pictures of because I've always wanted to see an F4. We have the I'm going to probably mispronounce this, The de Havilland Canada Chipmunk T10, going as a static as well. We'll get a bit more, talk a bit more about that in a second. And the MiG 17,
MiG
MiG 10,
15.
no, what? MiG
Basically,
15, yeah.
so the one that got announced is just the Polish sort of variant. So we mentioned a few weeks ago of the MiG 17 that got exported to places like Poland and other places like that, and they basically just have their own weird and wonderful names for them. So the one that's going is the with the weird name that we probably can't really pronounce is just the MiG 15 from Poland.
Yeah, so we'll probably put the actual name of it on screen, just because I don't speak Polish personally. So moving back to the chipmunk, it was developed in Canada in the late 1940s, and it is used by basically the Commonwealth, so the UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, all those countries, and it is still operational. It was operational for 70 years at least, and is used as a trainer aircraft, and has been used, like I said, since the 1940s.
Yeah, it is still in use, and the BBMF do own two of these aircraft, and they do still use them for some pilot training. And we spoke about David Peters a minute ago, and he does also do Chipmunk training and like pleasure flights for the Chipmunk, so it is still in service, and it's a remarkable aircraft that it's still in service for well over 70 years, more more like 90 years, 80, 90 years at this point. And it's just such an amazing aircraft. I've seen actually a display like aerobatic team of this back at Little Grandson in 2022 or yeah 2022, which was just so cool. And it's just wild to think that an aircraft used in the 1940s is still in service in 2026. And I'd love to go on a little chipmunk pleasure flight someday.
Yeah, and it's not only just in service, it's also attending air shows, which just shows that the airframe is still healthy enough. If there's a flying displays that it's doing, it's still healthy enough to do flying displays, let alone just statics in some air shows like Riyadh for this one.
Yeah, so now the F4 Phantom from Turkey is something that me, Joey, and one of my mates, Alfie, we have been looking so forward to. We honestly were hoping that it'd be flying. Unfortunately, it's only static, but seeing an F4 Phantom is going to be amazing. And we still do have hope for a flying Phantom from the Hellenic Air Force. Now, we haven't mentioned that the Phantoms are coming out of service now because these countries do still have some parts for this. They are managing to go strong and probably buying any remaining US parts of F4 Phantoms. And I know there is an F4 Phantom being restored in the United States. So hopefully that will be coming to the display circuit very soon. But these Phantoms will be going out of service within the next 5 years, I reckon, as it's a very old airframe, and there are starting to be a lot of crashes and malfunction, especially in Iran, which is where we have talked about these mainly.
Yeah, it's definitely one that you want to get as many pictures of as possible because you might not see it forever, you might not see it for long either.
Yeah, so the flying display for well, there's only one flying display for this week, but I think it's an amazing one. Now it's called the Turkish Stars, and this is something that also I've really been wanting to see a flying F5, and we get to see up to eight, if not nine of them, depending on how generous they're feeling. So the F5 is a training aircraft produced by the United States. There's many, many, many variants of this aircraft, literally hundreds of variants, and which include the main variants, which is the F5 and the F20 Tiger Shark. So the F20 was basically an F5, but with an F18 engine strapped to the back of it, rather than its two conventional engines, which we'll get to in a minute, which are General Electric J85 turbojet engines. So yeah, I've been wanting to see this aircraft, and the Petruli Swiss, which are retiring actually very soon. Actually, I heard use the F5, so it's so cool that I do get to see an F5. It's something that I get to tick off my bucket list along with the F4 Phantom.
Yeah, so the Turkish Stars are basically the Turkish equivalent of the Red Arrows. They are the national aerobatic display team for the Turkish Air Force. They perform in over 20 different countries. So you think maybe the Red Arrows perform in majority of the UK and sometimes in Greece, sometimes in a few different countries. The Turkish Stars perform in over 20 countries. Well, most of the time it's only a few per year, but they have performed in over 20 different countries. And as for the UK, they haven't performed here in over 10 years as of 2010 they have not done a performance in the UK. They were scheduled to do Riyadh in 2023, but there was also a major earthquake in Turkey in 2023. So a lot of the air forces and public's attention was focused on aid and recovery for that. So they didn't make it in 2023, but they are coming back this year for the first time in 16 years.
Yeah, so the stats of the F5, it can go up to Mach 1.6 or 1050 miles per hour. Its service ceiling is 51,800 feet. Its rate of climb is 34,000 feet a minute, which is very impressive. So it can basically get up to its max height if it pushed itself in about a 1.5 minute, just over 1.5 minutes. Its max Gs are plus 7.33 and minus 3 Gs, so that's well more than enough. That's completely fine for aerobatic displays. Like I said, it uses two General Electric J85 turbojet engines with a range of 1,400 kilometers. And like Joey said, it has not been to the UK for a display in 2010. However, we can't really find out if it's ever been to Riyadh before, as it's not sort of something that's very easy to find pre 2010.
Yeah, so they do have an incredible livery. We'll probably put the picture up for the announcement on screen. I cannot wait to get pictures of this. It's going to be so fun to get pictures of. I know that we have the red arrows with the British flag on the back and the red jets, but these jets are going to be so much more unique to take pictures of because, I mean, we live in the UK, we get pictures of the red arrows every year, but to see something this unique, especially being F5s, which I think sort of everyone wants to get pictures of, especially with several of them flying in formation. It's such a unique livery. I can't wait to see it.
So the bit about the team, they were formed in 1992 and they first displayed in 1993, and they're based at Konya Air Base, obviously in Turkey, and their display can be up to 20 to 25 minutes. So it's definitely quite a long display, and it's definitely beautiful opportunity to get pictures, as they do sort of like a synchro part, I believe, where you can get pictures of two aircraft together or just one aircraft, which is what I'm more excited about because I prefer I like watching displays, but unfortunately, with displays, it's hard to get good, like sharp photos because you're more zoomed out of the jets rather than if you were fully zoomed in on one jet. So I'm excited to get hopefully some good pictures. We'll have two opportunities, if not maybe three, depending on if they perform on the Friday as well as the Saturday and Sunday to get some pictures of these aircraft. I know I'm going into the showground Saturday and Sunday, and I'll be camping on the Friday.
Yeah, and I'm going Saturday, I believe, and we'll be meeting up there, sitting on the stands, watching these perform. And something that I also would like to see from the Turkish Air Force, and the fact that these guys are going gives me hope that we might see Solo Turk going, which is Turkey's answer to the Typhoon display team we have. So if the Turkish stars are the red arrows, the Solo Turk is like the Typhoon display team. It's sort of the single jet aerobatic maneuvers display. So I'm hoping that we get a bit more of Turkish Air Force going in some future takeoff Thursdays.
I do hate to break your heart here, Joey, but Solotag is confirmed not to be going this year. Confirmed by Riyadh themselves in their Instagram or TikTok comment sections. I know someone asked about it, and they confirmed that they will not be going this year. I know they were banned last year. Solotag was banned last year for many reasons, including sort of too low of passes, going over the crowd multiple times, and having a danger in air shows elsewhere other than Riyadh. So they were banned last year, and they are unfortunately not attending this year. So it is something that I want to see. They have a beautiful livery on their aircraft, but yeah, unfortunately, Joey, they are not going this year. Now, the final announcement
Yeah,
we
it's
do
unfortunate.
have is the wing walkers, which I've seen many times in my career, in my photography career. I've seen them probably upwards of 50 to 100 times, somewhere within that sort of range. Um, and yeah, it's something always exciting to see. They're quite good aircraft to get photos of when the lighting's correct. But yeah, one story I have about them is that I remember when I was at Bournemouth Air Show a few years ago, one of them crashed into the harbour. So that was Yeah, that was definitely something to hear about because well, they started flying off basically mid-display. We had no idea what was happening. No aircraft were coming into display. My dad on the radio said one of them's got an issue, and then about 5 minutes later, we heard that one of them's crashed into one of the harbours. Now, both the pilot and the wing walker were both okay. Bit of a scare, but they were back up in a new aircraft, and they have restored that aircraft since. So yeah, that's basically the only story I have about them. I saw them at Hampshire Air Show last year, and I've seen them at Midlands last year as well. Like I said, I've seen them hundreds of times. But they use Stearman biplanes, so pretty aerobatic, pretty robust aeroplanes that have been used for things like crop dusting in the past. So if you've ever watched the Planes movie by Disney and Pixar, you will see that there's one with Dusty at the start of the movie doing some crop dusting. They've also been used for training back in the day, and they've also been used for aerobatic flying.
Yeah, the wing walkers are very fun to see. I mean, I see them every year at Blackpool Air Show and sometimes Southport Air Show if I go. I don't always go to Southport Air Show, but I see them every year at Blackpool Air Show. Yeah. So it's certainly a fun one to see. And I can't wait to see them at Blackpool Air Show again and any other air shows that I go to that they go to.
Yeah, so they'll probably never get an answer Riat, so because they're not that usually at Riat you get these fast set display teams or these well-known display teams, and not these lower end. Not to put them down or anything, but lower end sort of less recognised, not a national display team is what I'm trying to say here. Not one that's like funded or like sponsored by the armed forces of the RAF or anything. But yeah, it's always nice to see the Midlands. I mean, you can't really see the girls on top unless you have like your like camera zoomed in or whatever. Just because it's a tiny dot on the top of a massive plane, and they're already quite far, like hundreds of feet away from you. But yeah, it's always nice to see when you're zoomed in on the lens, you can see them doing their little dances on the wing.
Yeah, it really puts my 100, 150 to 600 millimeter lens to use when I'm trying to get a good picture of them and you can see them on the wings doing their acrobatics while they're doing aerobatics. It's very impressive.
So unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. So Joey, do you want to take us through your weekly 2 minute recap?
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a more broad recap this time because there was 2 weeks of stuff. So we went over the Iran war stuff. We went and listed all the aircraft that they had lost. We touched a bit on the Ukrainian drone thing, which we also touched on last episode. We went over space news with Booster 19, Ship 39, New Glenn 3, Artemis 2, and then NASA's Boeing 777. We went over the Iceland Air pilot that is under investigation. We went over the B-21 Raider refueling. We went over the 22-hour-long flight for Qantas. We went over the EasyJet aborting its landing because of fireworks. And then we went into weather. We talked about the recent outbreak. We then did our main bit of the segment talking about tornadoes as a whole, weather as a whole, past outbreaks, uh, radar systems, and all that. Then we went over uh, quite the amount of aircraft announcements from last week's Takeoff Thursday, a few Midland announcements, and this week's Takeoff Thursday, and a few other announcements.
So that is the 2 minute recap. I'll probably put a bit at the start of the video as well for this. But yeah, sorry for any coughing or me having to turn my mic off for a bit because I am a bit ill this week, unfortunately, and you probably can tell because I've had a throat sweet halfway through as well. So I'll probably put a bit at the start as well just to let people know. But we do hope you enjoyed this week, and we have hopefully shared our passion about tornadoes with you and sort of explain in basic detail because we know a bit more, but we're not exactly meteorologists for the National Weather Service or anything. So we do hope you've enjoyed. And the name of the podcast I think is very very fitting for tornadoes. But yeah, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week. So take care, everyone.